Hey guys, and welcome back to another video for the Warhammer Online private server called Interbellum. And today we're going to look at the class mechanics of the High Elves. So the High Elves here on the Interbellum server have been renamed to the Asur, which is a little bit more lore friendly. Archmages will use Winds of Magic. Every 3 seconds they will gain 1 stack of magic at random, whether that is life, heavens, or light magic. And it will stack up to 3 times. Whenever you cast a spell from that lore of magic, it will consume 1 stack if present, and you will augment your spells. Please note, this is an automatic augmentation of spells. You don't have to do something else. Now, augments apply effects which provide additional damage, healing, or extra effects to the skills. Archmages can constantly augment their skills, but they do not always control the income of those winds, which means that although you may augment your spells for extra damage, healing, or some other extra effect, you don't always know what's going to happen when you do that. There's going to be some random effects there. Besides that, the Archmage will also have access to a 4th Lord of Magic, which is Quash. I hope I say that one correctly. And these are magic skills that do not use your mechanic and exist as a way for you guys to use abilities whenever you do not want to augment your skills. So giving you the opportunity to save the augmented skills for the right moment. If you want to burst, you're going to nuke some enemies. It's a good way to do it since you're going to have extra damage or save somebody with the extra heal, so on and so forth. Each specialization of the Archmage, as on the Sorcerer as well, will have spells from all 3 categories of the lore, and you can use them freely. But the one you specialize at, you will have more spells, and you'll also gain those stacks of magic a little bit easier than the other ones. Now, just to say something for the record, the devs have said before that they don't want to have full mirrors, and they try not to. However, sometimes it's very difficult. So this is the only full mirror mechanism in the game. And the reason for this, and I'm quoting this from their post, is that they could easily make 6 distinct specializations out of this mechanic, as they could pull spells from 6+2 different lore of magic in the game. So while the Archmage and the Sorc both use the same base mechanic, all 6 of their collective specializations are still unique from each other. We said this before, that they try and do the game as lore friendly as they can, but there will be moments that the game mechanics don't allow it, or it's a little bit more difficult, or for whatever the reason they feel it fits better not to follow the lore, they will do so. So let's go now and have a look on the Apprentice, aka the Swordmaster. The Apprentice will be using a mechanic now called Sigils of Balance. Now, this mechanic is an incredibly modified version of the 1-2-3 mechanism they had before. Just to remind you what the 1-2-3 mechanism was, is skill 1, you press it. If you're not blocked and parried and is applied, activate skill number 2, which you can then use for a certain amount of time. If that skill is successful, it doesn't get blocked, parried, then it will activate skill 3. If skill 2 is parried or blocked, you go back to skill 1 and you have to use skill 1 again. If it doesn't get blocked and parried, you activate 2. If it doesn't get blocked and parried, you go to 3. Once you use 3, you reset the whole cycle and you come back to it. So that mechanism has a big problem, that your 3rd one is the most powerful one, and if you really want to get there, you have to have 2 successful hits in a row, which versus the tank it might have been possible because they have high block, high parry, and so on and so forth. So on this new mechanism, the abilities can generate one of the 4 following sigils, which will last 15 seconds until they are used. And these sigils are the Eldrazi, the Hoeth, the Val, and the Asurian. Let us now have a closer look to this modified mechanism for the Apprentice. Number 1 abilities will generate either Eldrazi or Hoeth sigils in addition to the primary effects. Number 2 abilities will generate either Vol or Asurian in addition to the primary effects, and they will also consume both Eldrazi and Hoeth sigils in order to create additional effects, which means you can press number 1 ability once, and let's say you get an Eldrazi sigil, then you can press 1 again and get a Hoeth sigil, which lasts 15 seconds, remember, and then you press ability number 2, which do its primary function, and then it will consume the Hoeth and Eldrazi sigils you have there, and that will give you the additional effects. At the same time, number 2 ability will generate the Vol and the Asurian sigils, which stay for another 15 seconds. So if you decide to press ability number 3, you will generate action points in addition to the primary effect, and you will also consume both Vol and Asurian sigils you have active. So basically, Number 2 uses by default the number 1 sigils. Number 3 uses the number 2 sigils. So as you progress, you generate something, you use it, you generate something, you use it. And that's how you go along this mechanism. Now, things to notice are the following. First of all, you're not locked into any next step, which means if you press number 1, you can press it, or you can go straight to number 2 and then number 3. You don't necessarily have to go in order, so you can modify your sequences and what buffs you want, what effects you want, depending on your gameplay and your strategy. So the abilities which consume sigils, right, will consume both. So both active ones, allowing you to gain both additional effects at the same time. Every ability has the base effect that affects even if there is no appropriate sigil to be consumed. That is the primary effect, and then the secondary. Now, I really hope I explained that correctly. If I made any mistake, please let me know, because to be honest, I understand the mechanism, but I'm not sure if I can translate my understanding into words. However, there is an example, and let's have a look at that. So this may clarify a few things that I might have not said perfectly. So you could, in one occasion, use 1, 2, 3 skills, so you're going to gain 1 additional effect on your number 2 ability and on your number 3. Or you can go 1, 1, 2, 3 for 2 additional effects on your number 2 and 1 additional on your number 3. Or even if you want, you can go 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, so you get 2 additional effects on both 2s and 3s, because you have 15 seconds, so you can do 1, 1, and get 2 effects from the first one for number 2. Then press number 2, you get those double effects on number 2, save them, go 1, 1, because 1 doesn't consume number 2, and then you have the 2 abilities on 2, 2 abilities on 1, press another 2, use the 1s, and now you have more effects on 2, which are going to be translated to more effects on 3. So you can build your sigils, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, you build 2, then transfer that into number 2, again 1, transfer the sigils to number 2, right? The skills are gone, and then you press 3 and you get additional effects that you already stuck. The point here is that you can do a tremendously long sequence like 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, then 1, 1, because you have 15 seconds. So if you go over that limit, they go away, you start all over again. So you got to keep a little bit of track of the time and how many times you can do that. Another example is you can go 2, 2, 3, because remember, you're not locked into using them 1, 2, 3 in order as before. So you just press twice, now skill number 2 and 1's the third, and you get 2 additional effects on 3, or you can just spam number 3 to gain action points. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. This gives you a lot of versatility to your gameplay. You can do a lot of things with this. Here are 3 skills of the Apprentice that the devs shared with us, so feel free to pause the video and check them out. The White Lions, now they have a new mechanism called Ferocity. Ferocity has a base of 0 and stacks all the way up to 8. Ferocity, however, is generated by the use of your pet skills. In the Interbellum server, the pet skills are action point costing abilities which you personally use, and they are sourced from your lion. This means that if you want your lion to do an AoE skill, you have to press the button. If you want to do a slow, you gotta press the button, or whatever other abilities the pet may have. You totally control the pet. It's not like before that the pet is there, it has 2 or 3 abilities and it will do them in rotation automatically. You are in control of the pet, which means you control the gameplay anytime you want, any way you want. Now, Ferocity powers most of your abilities that you utilize throughout the game, which means you really need to have Ferocity up and going at all times. Now, note that the Axeman does not have a pet, so the line will have a non-pet specialization, and they interact with this mechanic a little bit differently in order to generate AP and Ferocity in a different way through direct skills. White Lions use also a tertiary mechanic of bleeding. We've seen bleeding before in the Witch Elf. Basically, it's something that your abilities apply to your enemy target, and then you gain additional effect, or it does additional things, as they call them. So, as an example, I suppose if the target is bleeding, you do extra damage. If the target is bleeding, you apply slow. If the target is bleeding, you do extra damage for X amount, or your pet does this, your pet does that, and so on and so forth. Now, also, since the bad abilities are off the global cooldown, that means that the specializations of the Hunter and the Guardsman can use those abilities more often, giving them a nice short burst. So they can burst down and target quickly, they have high output, but also means that they will run out of resources quickly. That is the counterbalance on this. In addition to that, as a counter, we've seen that the devs are offering some counter mechanics to some classes. Here, the way to counter the white line is to actually kill the pet if it is a pet class specialization, because without the pet they can generate ferocity, and since most of their abilities are driven by ferocity, that is the way to cripple them. Last but not least, the archer. We used to know this guy as a shadow warrior. So archers on the Interbellum server will use the stance mechanic. The archer stance mechanic is off the global cooldown, but they have a 15-second shared cooldown. No ability is restricted to any stance. You can use any ability in any stance you are. There are, of course, tactics and passive in each specialization, which will allow you to modify those stances beyond the base values. The stances are the scout stance, which you gain 60% range. Then we have skirmish stance. All of your abilities are now castable while moving. But whenever you deal direct damage to an enemy, you will dispel marked from them. In addition, you will lose 2 mass. Don't forget, mass is the mechanic, the statistic, which controls the crowd control effects in the game. The lower your mass, the more susceptible you are to being crowd controlled. Last stance will be the assault stance. Whenever you deal direct damage to an enemy, you will refresh the duration of marked on the enemy, and you also gain 15% outgoing damage and 1 mass, but you lose 40% range. So in this stance, you'll gain damage, you will gain more protection against crowd control, but you lose your range. The default range on bow abilities for the archer is 75 feet, which means that while you are in the scout stance, you will have 120 feet range. In skirmish stance, you will have 75 feet range, and in assault stance, you'll have 45 feet range. Marked, just to remind you, is an effect that archers excel at applying over other classes, but that doesn't mean there aren't any other classes that can do that. However, marked will last for 10 seconds and reduces the target's damage reduction. So while the target is marked, it receives 50%, suppose, more damage. Plus, imagine if you're also on assault stance, you gain another 15, so that should add up to 30% more damage output. So all these changes that they've done, that simply means that you can swap stances based on the rates of combat that you are currently engaging in. Also, the 15-second cooldown prevents you from swapping constantly the stances, and if you're in combat and that combat mechanic is changing quickly, if you choose the wrong stance, you're going to have a huge disadvantage. Also, scout stance is giving you your range advantage with power of 75 feet skills at 120. Skirmish stance is giving you a lot of mobility at the cost of removing the marked debuff. And of course, assault is your stronger stance, but it's a very short range. Now, also keep in mind that the new stat system removes the need to convert stats from melee into range skills and so on and so forth, which means that the melee skills are useful in skirmish and scout stance as well. The Asur have been overhauled as a whole race, and we can see now that the Archmage has the augment mechanism, which is going to be very useful both for the healing and the DPS spec they're going to have, along with the fourth lore mechanic of Quash, which they're going to use that outside of their augment mechanic, allowing them to have a burst and adapt to the situations. The Swordmaster, aka the Apprentice Interbellum server, also gets free of that lock mechanism 1, 2, 3, giving him more versatility, more freedom to choose what they want to do and how to utilize their enchantments, how to generate their AP, and the damage output and burst. The white line also is now almost free from the pet, in the sense that now you have a lot more control over your pet. You control the abilities, so you choose when the ability is going to happen, your burst, your gameplay, your base style. Whether you want to have constant damage or burst is up to you by controlling the pet. But also is your weakness, because the pet dies, your mechanism doesn't work very well without ferocity, unless you're playing the Axeman that doesn't have a pet. And finally, the Archer. I do like the changes on the stances, that you are not locked to them. They're outside of your global cooldown, so you can instantly switch into whatever you need to adapt quickly and not be in a disadvantage, provided, of course, you pick the right stance and you don't make a mistake. And I also like how the counter effects are, like when you go into mobility, you also become more susceptible to CC, or when you go into assault stance, you're really close, so you do more damage, but you're going to receive a lot more as well. It seems like they maintained pretty much the same mechanic as before, in the sense that we got a healer that adapts the archer with the stances. Still 1, 2, 3 mechanic for the swordmaster, but more free, more open, with more choices. And the white lion, I think, is getting some changes, which the lion has more control over what it needs to do and what it needs to do. So if I said anything wrong, guys, I didn't understand something correctly, you're part of the dev team or not, and you spotted it, please leave it down below in the comments so we can inform people correctly. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, help the channel grow. I'll see you on the next video.